You never think your own blood will poison you. But that night, as the snow fell outside the window of the Riverside Grill, I watched my son lift his glass and smile, and something in me just cracked. I used to think betrayal came from strangers. Turns out it wears your last name. I'm Sean Morgan, 67 years old. I built my company from a rusted pickup and a handshake, turned it into a $48 million empire. I've seen men lie, cheat, and steal, but I never imagined my own son would try to kill me for money. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. That New Year's Eve was supposed to be a celebration, a closing chapter of hard work and long nights. The place was lit with gold lights and Sinatra on the speakers. Troy raised his glass, called me the toughest man he's ever known. I laughed. I actually laughed. And then I saw the security guard at the bar, pale as paper, staring straight at me. He didn't say a word, just pointed, almost invisible, at my drink. Later that night, I took that glass home. Something about it gnawed at me, like a splinter under my skin. I had it tested the next morning. When the lab called back, the tech's voice shook. Mr. Morgan, that wasn't champagne in your system. That was enough cardiac suppressant to drop a bull. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't some mistake. My son had planned it. My own flesh and blood had written me off like a line item in his debt ledger. I didn't die that night, but something inside me did. And from that moment on, I made a promise. He'd learn what real loss feels like. I didn't sleep that night. The city outside my condo was wrapped in frost and silence, but inside, my mind was burning. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, felt like it was mocking me. My own son. I kept seeing his face, that polite smile as he poured my drink. The same kid I taught to ride a bike on Oak Street. The one who broke his arm falling off and said, "I'll do it again, Dad. I'll get it right this time." Now he tried to end me. For what? Money? Freedom from a father's shadow? At dawn, I drove to the pier. The water was black glass, and the cold bit through my coat. I lit a cigarette, first one in 20 years, and said out loud, "You picked the wrong man to bury, Troy." The smoke curled up into the winter air like a vow. That's when Gary showed up. I hadn't seen him in years, my old partner, the kind of man who can read you before you speak. He looked at me once and said, "You found out, didn't you?" I just nodded. He didn't ask how. Didn't need to. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Then you've got two choices, disappear or take control of the ending." I laughed, but there was no humor left in me. "You think revenge is worth it at my age?" He smiled, slow and cold. "Sean, this is revenge. It's accountability." And in that moment, with the waves slapping against the docks and the cigarette burning down to my fingers, I knew he was right. I wasn't going to the police. I wasn't running. I was going to let my son believe he'd won. And when his guard dropped, when the greed took over, that's when I'd strike back. I called Gary before sunrise and told him to bring coffee and an honest face. He showed up with both, and with a manila envelope that smelled like someone who still believed paperwork could fix the world. "I found someone," he said, sliding a business card across the table. "Laura Bennett, litigation, estates, and a stubborn streak that doesn't quit." Her card looked like the kind of thing that could stare down a boardroom and win. We met her in a no-frills office 2 days later. Laura had that clean, efficient energy, sharp haircut, sharper questions. She didn't gasp, didn't tell me to sit. She listened, then tapped a pen against her pad and said, "You did the right thing by keeping the glass. Toxicology is one thing. Motive and means are another. We build those, and we don't play to headlines. We play to juries and bank accounts." She suggested private investigators. Quiet, surgical. Gary hired them by noon. They moved like ghosts, digging through bank records, following accounts, trawling through signatures. I felt like a kid again, watching grown men do homework for me. It was humiliating and strangely thrilling. This new currency was truth, not cash. 2 nights later, the lead detective called me at 11. His voice had that metallic, tired edge of a man who'd seen more than he wanted. "Mr. Morgan," he said, "you weren't paranoid. We pulled Troy's statements." He's leveraged to the hilt. Loans, offshore interest, something messy with a private lender. Ellen's name shows up more than yours should. My throat went dry. How much? I asked. There was a pause. Paper rustled. At least 1.8 million. And there's something else. His voice dropped. We found attempted transfers from a brokerage account in your name. Someone forged paperwork to get access. For a second, the room tilted. The man I'd coached through algebra and Little League practice had been pretending to be my son while he'd been picking my bones clean. I wrapped my hands around the phone like it could anchor me. Send me everything, Laura said when I told her, and shut your mouth. Let us move. I want to call Troy, to scream, to throw the rest of my life at him. Instead, I did what Laura told me and shut up. Then the detective added something that made coffee taste like poison. There's a file on Ellen. You might want to know. She's trying to sell April's paintings. When the detective said Ellen's name, something raw and loud rose in my chest, like a car alarm in the dead of night. April's paintings were the last piece of her left in the world. A crooked vase on a windowsill, a beach at dusk, the way she caught light. The idea that someone hawked them for cash felt like watching a hand take the last photograph out of fire. Gary swore under his breath. Laura's face went flat, professional fury sharpening her features. If she's trying to sell them, we've got motive bundled with means, she said. Proof of intent is everything. She wanted receipts, emails, a buyer's name, paper trails that made lying impossible. The detectives went to work tapping gallery contacts, inboxes, crypto wallets, because in 2025 your skeletons come with transaction IDs. A week of quiet digging pulled out things that made me sick. Emails from Ellen to an art broker, photos of canvases being photographed in daylight for listings, bank alerts showing deposits routed through a shell company. There was a cold-blooded efficiency to it. No messy emotion, just commerce where memory should have been. Troy's name kept shading the edges. Phone logs, late-night rides to meet brokers, a courier receipt with his initials. I stared at the images of April's paintings on a marketplace page. The prices marked down as if memory carried coupons. I'd once promised April I'd never let her work be pawned off like cheap glass. That promise had weight now, like an old coin in my pocket. Laura leaned forward and said what I knew I had to do. We set a trap. You play fragile. You hint at a fund. Make Troy think you're handing him the keys. He'll move and he'll expose himself. Gary smiled, a thin, predatory smile I remember from our scrappier days. Let him feel safe, he said. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Troy's name. I could hear my own voice in my head, soft, tired. The man he wanted dead. Then I pressed call. Hey, Dad, Troy said, careless, on the first ring. I let the line breathe. Troy, I said, and the voice was mine. It was a script I'd been rehearsing in the mirror. Old, gullible, lit from the inside with the scent of surrender. About that fund, I heard myself say, we need to talk. Troy showed up that afternoon, wearing confidence like a new suit. Ellen followed half a step behind. Same perfume April used to wear, different intent. I made sure the lighting in my study was low, the bourbon decanter half empty, my voice trembling just enough to sell the act. Dad, Troy said, flashing that rehearsed grin, you look great. Been resting? I chuckled weakly, thought maybe it's time to simplify things, create a family fund, secure your future. I watched his pupils widen just slightly. Greed has a pulse, and I could hear it. We talked numbers, foundations, legacy. Every word was bait, and he swallowed it whole. I told him we'd sign everything in Laura's office next week, right after New Year's, clean start. He nodded, eyes flicking to Ellen, already calculating. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet house. The air smelled of old paper and betrayal. Gary called. He bought it, he asked. Hook, line, and inheritance clause. I said. Gary laughed softly. Good, because the detectives just wrapped the last piece. Loan sharks, forged trust documents, even medical records access. He was planning this for months. I stared at April's favorite painting, the lighthouse, the one she said was about forgiveness. The beam cut to the dark ocean on canvas, but all I saw was a wreck beneath. That night, I couldn't stop picturing Troy's face when the truth hit. The way that fake charm would peel off, layer by layer, until there was just panic left. Next week, he thought he'd be walking into his inheritance. He didn't know he'd be walking into judgment. The morning of the signing, the sky looked like brushed steel cold, unbending. I put on the same suit I wore the day I sold my company. It still fit, but I wasn't the same man. This time, I wasn't closing a deal. I was ending an illusion. Laura's office smelled of lemon polish and justice. She set everything up, 2 folders on the table, one labeled Morgan Family Foundation, the other, thicker, marked evidence. Gary stood by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. He gave me a nod that said, "Let the curtain rise." When Troy and Ellen walked in, I almost believed their act. Ellen leaned in for a hug, her hands icy, rehearsed. Troy clapped my back. "Let's make it official, huh, old man?" he said, grinning like a TV commercial for betrayal. Laura smiled politely. "Before we begin, there's a quick matter to clarify," she said, opening the thicker folder. Out came photos, printouts, lab results, financial records. The air changed. I watched Troy's smile stiffen, Ellen's hand twitch. "This," Laura continued, sliding the toxicology report across the table, "is what was in your father's glass. And these," she flipped to the forged documents, "are transfers and signatures tied to both your names." Ellen gasped. Troy leaned forward, trying to control his tone. "This is insane. Someone's framing us." Gary cut him off. "Framing you? You did a fine job yourself." He tossed another photo onto the pile, Ellen, mid-meeting, handing over one of April's paintings. I spoke for the first time. "I built an empire from nothing, son. You really thought I wouldn't see a con when it's sitting at my dinner table?" My voice was calm. Too calm. "You've got 2 choices. Walk away with your freedom, or stay, and I make sure you spend the rest of your life explaining yourself to a jury." The silence that followed could have cut glass. Ellen whispered, "Troy, let's go." He didn't move. His eyes met mine. Fear, rage, disbelief all crashing together. For the first time in his life, he realized he couldn't out-talk me. When they finally left, Laura closed a folder and exhaled. Gary smiled faintly. "That," he said, "was the cleanest execution I've ever seen." But even as the door clicked shut behind them, I felt it, something unfinished, like thunder rumbling after the lightning. Because the thing about betrayal, it echoes. They left the office without looking back, but their silence followed me home like smoke that wouldn't clear. You'd think victory would feel lighter. It didn't. It sat on my chest like an old debt. That night, I walked through the house barefoot, hearing the echo of every memory I tried to bury. April's laughter in the kitchen, Troy's small hands smudging the glass when he drew smiley faces on the window. I'd built this place for them, and now it felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. Gary called. "You did what had to be done," he said. "Don't second-guess it." "I don't," I replied. "But tell me something, Gary. When you win like this, why does it still feel like losing?" He paused. "Because you cared. That's what makes you different from him." Outside, the snow had started again, slow, heavy flakes drifting across the lawn. I opened the door, letting the cold bite my skin. It grounded me. The world still moved, even if my heart had stopped somewhere between anger and mercy. A few days later, Laura sent over the final documents. The foundation papers were ready, the April Morgan Fund. It was more than a name. It was redemption dressed in legal ink. "You'll make something good out of all this," she said over the phone. Gary came by with a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. "You're free now," he said. "Freedom's strange," I told him. "You spent a lifetime earning it. And when you finally have it, you don't know what to do with it." We sat in silence, 2 old men staring at the glow of fireplace. He raised his glass. "To endings," he said. I looked into the firelight and shook my head. "No, Gary, to consequences." Because I knew Troy wouldn't let it end there. Men like him don't walk away. They circle back. And when he did, I'd be ready. A week passed before the first sign. A call at 2:17 a.m., unknown number, no voice on the other end. Just breathing. Heavy, deliberate. I didn't need caller ID to know it was him. Troy never learned the art of silence. He used it like a weapon. By morning, I found the gate lock busted. Nothing stolen, just the symbolism. A message. I cleaned up the mess myself, humming Sinatra under my breath, like the old days. That's life. I muttered, and for the first time, I meant it differently. Laura insisted we file a report. Gary disagreed. Let him swing, he said. The more desperate he gets, the more he shows his hand. I trusted Gary. Always did. We set cameras, changed passwords, and waited. Revenge isn't a sprint. It's a chess game played in silence. 3 nights later, the motion sensors caught him. Troy, standing by the garage, just staring through the glass like he was visiting a grave. His reflection in the camera feed looked almost ghost-like, older, hollowed out. For a second, I didn't see my son. I saw the wreckage of greed. The next morning, I called him. Calm, steady. You want to talk, Troy? He laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. Talk? You humiliated me in front of everyone. Dad, you destroyed my life. No, I said, you did that yourself. I just made sure the lights were on while you did it. He hung up, but before the line went dead, I heard Ellen's voice in the background, frantic, pleading. And something in that tone told me she wasn't on his side anymore. Gary warned me. He's spiraling. Don't underestimate a man who's lost his pride. I'm counting on it, I said, because the next move wasn't his to make. It was mine, and I already knew where he'd break first. In public. The first public hit came faster than I expected. I wasn't looking for it. It just landed in my lap, wrapped in arrogance. Troy tried to sell one of April's paintings again, this time through a charity auction downtown. A small crowd, champagne glasses, polite applause, the kind of place where people pretend to care about art while checking their portfolios. I showed up uninvited. Gray suit, no tie. Quiet confidence. Gary stood beside me, hands in pockets, playing the role of silent witness. When the auctioneer announced Lot 27, Lighthouse at Dusk, signed by April Morgan, I stepped forward. That's interesting, I said, loud enough to stop the room, because that painting's not for sale. It was stolen. Every head turned. Troy froze, microphone in hand, the color draining from his face. Dad, he started, but I cut him off. Don't dad me, I said, walking closer. That painting was meant for her gallery fund. You remember that, right? Before you decided to use it as a bargaining chip for your debts. The crowd shifted, whispers growing into a murmur. The auctioneer tried to intervene, but Laura's assistant, clever woman, stepped up and handed over a document folder. Ownership certificate, she said, and police verification pending. Troy's hand trembled as he set the microphone down. Cameras flashed. People recorded. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. I leaned in, close enough for only him to hear. This is mercy, son. I could have pressed charges. He didn't answer. Ellen stood by the exit, eyes wet, not with guilt but with exhaustion. She looked at me and whispered, I told him not to. I walked out into the cold air, the sound of my shoes echoing off the marble. Gary caught up, grinning. 1 humiliation down, he said. 2 to go. Yeah, I replied, watching my breath fog and night. And next time, he won't see it coming. Because shame was just the opening act. The main event was still waiting in the wings. The video from that auction spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. Some blogger labeled it, Millionaire Dad Exposes His Greedy Son Live. Within days, it hit 1 million views. Troy became a meme. Screenshots of his stunned face. Headlines calling him the fallen heir. I didn't post a thing. The internet did my work for me. Gary called it digital karma. Laura called it inadmissible evidence with a poetic twist. I called it justice with Wi-Fi. But humiliation has a half-life. By the 3rd week, Troy was trying to crawl back into relevance. He launched a podcast called A True Family and Forgiveness. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. He sat there in front of a ring light, preaching about healing from toxic parents. I almost admired the nerve. Gary texted me one night. "He's poking the bear." I replied, "Good. Bears bite back." The second public blow came during his first live episode. Laura's team had uncovered proof of the forged medical files, documents Troy used to match the poison to my health history. I forwarded them anonymously to a journalist from the Chronicle, the same paper that once called me the Iron Gentleman of Logistics. 2 days later, the article dropped. Son, a retired mogul linked to medical data theft. His sponsors bailed overnight. The podcast vanished. Troy called me that evening. His voice was raw, shredded. "Why are you doing this?" he yelled. "I'm not doing anything," I said softly. "I'm just letting the truth breathe." He went quiet. I could almost hear his pride collapsing on the other end. Then he whispered something I didn't expect. "You've already won, Dad. Why keep going?" I looked at April's lighthouse painting, its beams still cutting through the dark. "Because you still don't understand what you destroyed," I said and hung up. Gary later poured us both a drink. "2 down," he said. I nodded, my voice low. 1 left, the final reckoning. And this time, it wouldn't just break his pride. It would strip him of the last thing he cared about. His name. By March. The frost was gone, but Troy's world was still frozen. No sponsors, no friends, and a reputation shredded into late-night punchlines. He'd gone from heir apparent to case study in greed. I thought maybe that would be enough. That humiliation would teach what love couldn't. But men like Troy don't repent. They retaliate. He showed up at my gate one Sunday morning, unshaven, wearing that same smirk he used to hide behind, as a kid, when he broke something expensive. "You think you've beaten me?" he said. "All you've done is make yourself look pathetic." I stepped outside, calm as a preacher. "You still think this is about looks, don't you?" He leaned forward, eyes wild. "You took everything from me." "No," I said, voice even. "I just stopped giving you things you never earned." He laughed, dry, desperate. "You think your little foundation will make you some kind of saint?" I smiled. "It already has. People believe in purpose, Troy. You wouldn't recognize it if it walked up and wrote you a check." He spat on the driveway. "I'm done playing your game." I leaned closer. "Good," I said quietly, "because the game's over." He stormed off, tires screeching down the hill. Gary came by later, saw the scuff marks on the concrete. "He's unraveling," he said. "Let him," I answered. Sometimes you have to let a man dig until he hits the bottom of himself. That night, I opened a draft press release for the April Morgan Foundation, our first major event, the official launch gala. Laura had secured the mayor's appearance, the local news, even a televised spot. It wasn't just charity. It was legacy. And somewhere deep down, I knew Troy would try to crash it. He couldn't resist an audience. Gary looked at the mock-up invitation and smiled. "You're baiting him, aren't you?" I poured another drink. "Not baiting," I said, finishing the story. Because every reckoning deserves a stage. And mine was almost ready. The night of the gala felt like the end of a long storm. The April Morgan Foundation banner hung above the entrance, lit gold against the city skyline. Jazz drifted from the ballroom, the kind April loved, soft melancholy, timeless. I stood at the edge of the crowd, shaking hands, smiling for photos, pretending not to see the ghosts that hovered in every reflection. Gary was on security detail that night, not official, just personal. He'd stationed 2 men at the doors and 1 near the stage. "You sure he'll show?" he asked. I nodded. He can help himself. Shame need an audience. Halfway through the evening, I saw him, Troy, hovering at the back of the hall. Clean suit, forced grin, eyes scanning the room like a wolf that lost its pack. He'd waited until the cameras were rolling. Of course he had. When the MC invited me up to speak, the spotlight burned white and hot. I walked to the podium, holding the speech I'd written a dozen times and never read once. "This foundation," I began, was born out of love, loss, and hard truth that redemption isn't inherited. It's earned. I saw movement in the crowd. Troy stepped forward, voice slicing through the music. You talk about redemption, Dad? How about hypocrisy? You ruined my life. The room froze. Gasps rippled through the guests. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I smiled, a slow, steady smile that carried years' restraint. Troy, I said, I'm glad you came. Saves me the trouble of introducing you. Gary signaled to the tech crew. The screen behind me flickered. Emails, bank transfers, voice recordings. The truth laid out like scripture. This, I said, gesturing toward it, is what happens when greed eats family alive. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Troy turned white as marble. He stumbled backward, muttering, You set me up. No, I said softly, stepping closer. You set yourself up. I just provided the lighting. He bolted for the exit, pushing through the crowd. Gary didn't stop him. He didn't need to. The whole city had just seen his confession. When the applause finally started, it wasn't loud. It was solemn, like a prayer answered too late. And for the first time in years, I felt April's hand on my shoulder. Not forgiveness, just peace. After the gala, the city didn't stop talking. The clip hit every local news feed by morning. Retired tycoon exposes son at charity gala. Reporters called it a Shakespearean reckoning in real time. I just called it closure, even if it didn't feel like it yet. Gary and I sat on the terrace the next day, black coffee in hand, silence between us heavy but comfortable. He finally said, You know, you didn't just destroy him. You erased him. I shook my head. No, I gave him a mirror. He destroyed himself. The board of the foundation sent flowers. Reporters left voicemails, and Laura insisted we control the narrative. I told her the truth didn't need PR. It just needed daylight. She smiled, that half-approving way lawyers do when they know you're right, but wish you weren't. That afternoon, I drove to April's grave. The ground was soft, the spring air thick with lilac. I told her everything. The poison, the lies, the gala, the silence afterward. I didn't do it for revenge, I said quietly. I did it so our name meant something again. A gust of wind rolled across the cemetery, carrying the faint sound of distant church bells. For a moment, I swore I could hear her laugh, the one that always followed. You're too stubborn for your own good, Sean. Maybe she was right. When I got home, the phone was blinking. A voicemail. I pressed play. Dad. Troy's voice cracked, unrecognizable. You win. You've got everything. Just stop digging. Please. I sat there, staring at the blinking red light. The apology I'd wanted for months had finally arrived, and it felt hollow, like a gun that clicks after the bullet's gone. Gary came by later. You okay? Yeah, I said. He finally said sorry. Gary poured us 2 fingers of bourbon and leaned back. So that's it then? I looked into the glass, watching the amber ripple in the light. Almost, I said, because I wasn't done yet. Forgiveness had one final act, and it wouldn't be spoken. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The world was quiet. The kind of silence that only comes after every storm has finally burned itself out. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat by the window watching the light crawl up the horizon. There was one thing left to do, and I knew exactly how it needed to end. I called Gary. One more meeting, I said. He didn't ask who. He already knew. We met Troy at the old marina, the same place where Gary and I used to unload shipments back in the 70s. The air smelled like salt, rust, and old decisions. Troy looked smaller somehow, like life had sanded him down. He didn't even fake a smile this time. I'm not here to fight, he said. I've got nothing left to fight for. Good, I said. Then maybe you'll finally listen. I handed him an envelope, documents from Laura, legally binding. Inside were 2 papers. One renouncing any claim to my estate, and another transferring what Louis still owned into a trust of the foundation. He stared at them, shaking his head. You still try and control me? No, I said. I'm freeing you. You've been chasing my shadow your whole life. This ends it. You walk away clean, Start over somewhere nobody knows your name. His eyes filled, not with remorse, but confusion. And if I don't sign, I met his gaze. Then you'll keep losing everything that's left of you, piece by piece. He looked down, sighed, and signed. The pen scratched across the paper like a closing door. Gary stepped forward, took the envelope, sealed it. "It's done," he said. Troy tried to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time, I saw what he really was. Not a villain, not a monster. Just a man who mistook greed for power and ended up bankrupt in every way that mattered. As he turned to leave, I said quietly, "You'll find peace, son, but not until you stop running from the truth." He didn't look back. When his car disappeared beyond the pier, Gary asked, "That the ending you wanted?" I stared out the horizon, the water shimmering gold in the morning light. "Not the one I wanted," I said, "the one that was needed." But as the sun climbed higher, I realized something. Even justice can't resurrect what love once buried. It's been a year since that morning on the pier. A full circle of seasons. Ice, bloom, heat, and now the soft chill of another December. People keep asking if I've forgiven him. Truth is, forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a room you learn to live in. The April Morgan Foundation has grown bigger than I ever imagined. Scholarships, art grants, therapy programs for women rebuilding their lives. Every week, someone new writes to say, "You gave me a second chance." And each time, I think, "No, you gave me one." Gary still visits on Sundays. We sit in the garden, drink black coffee, talk about everything except the past. Sometimes, he'll glance at April's lighthouse painting hanging in my office and say, "You ever notice how the light in that thing never fades?" I smile. "That's the point, Gary. It's supposed to outlast us." Last week, I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a photo. Troy, somewhere near the ocean, working at a small repair shop. He looked older, calmer. Maybe he finally found a place where my name didn't follow him. Maybe that's the real revenge. Not his ruin, but his reckoning. Tonight, the city is dressed in lights again, just like that night a year ago. But this time, the glass in my hand is clean, untouched. I raise it to the empty chair across the table. To you, April, I whisper, to everything we lost and everything we found. The clock strikes midnight. Fireworks bloom over the skyline. Somewhere out there, my son is breathing the same cold air. Maybe he's watching the same sky. I close my eyes, and for the first time in years, there's no anger left in me. Only the quiet satisfaction of a man who didn't just survive betrayal. He outlived it. And as the first dawn of the new year breaks over the harbor, I finally understand. Vengeance was never about destroying him. It was about rebuilding myself. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.